So let's talk about white privilege and fragility. White privilege and fragility. You probably think this lecture is about you, because it is. All right, but what is this white fragility anyway? Why does it matter in our whole discussion? Well, the word white fragility is a term that was coined by Dr. Robin DiAngelo, and she has a fabulous book that talks about it. What it really is this uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable feeling that white people get whenever you talk about race or their whiteness. White people get so uncomfortable and so don't want to talk about race that they'll do anything, whether it's intentional or not, to stop the conversation in the tracks. This is really important for people to acknowledge is that this is happening, because in order to kind of move past that and to become a supportive ally, you need to be able to overcome this white fragility that is holding you back from having really meaningful, deep, and productive conversations about racism and how we can dismantle it. All right. So let's talk about where these ideas are coming from in the first place. So one of the concepts of white fragility or racism stems from this idea of a good-bad binary. And so towards the end or after the civil rights era, where there were many of these new policies and laws put in place that basically made it legal consequences for anyone that's being overtly racist, it also became associated with the idea that being a racist is being a bad person. And it made it really hard for white people to talk about race. Because before this was happening, obviously a lot of people can get before all these laws and all these things were happening, people could get away with much more terrible things, right? And it was widely accepted, these racist attitudes. But now you have these laws in place, you have this whole social movement, and now it's like this idea is like, okay, well, you can't be overtly racist anymore. But it's beyond that. You can't even have these attitudes. It makes you a terrible person. And that really makes it hard for white people to acknowledge their internalized values. It is the truth. Point blank. I want you to redefine the way you think about racism, because a lot of times most people talk about it as either you are racist or you're not racist, which is not a good system, because that puts it in a binary. It doesn't acknowledge the fact that as white people, you have internalized racist values. That is just a fact of life. It is a really terrible and uncomfortable fact of life, but yet it is a fact of life. And so in order for you to move forward and become a supportive ally that can have meaningful conversations about race and help dismantle racism, you need to acknowledge that there's a spectrum of racism, right? Everyone has internalized values. There's going to be people on the extreme that act on it in very violent ways, and there are going to be people that don't, but still hold internalized racist values. All right, so this is kind of outlining what I'm talking about, more about the good-bad binary. So when we think about people that are racist, that are bad, we tend to associate them with all these negative terms. So you're bigoted, you're ignorant, you're mean-spirited, you're old. There's a stereotype about people being in the South. Then there's, you're not racist, you're good, educated, progressive, open-minded, well-intended, young, and northern. But this thing neglects to acknowledge is that people from both categories can definitely have internalized racist values. So that's why I said it is a spectrum, and it's whether or not you act on those values. So other concepts besides the good and bad binary is terms that include universalism, internalized superiority, and investment in this racial order, and segregation. Universalism. Basically, why can we all be the same? All right. So this idea that why can we all be the same is something that needs to be effectively challenged, because when you say things like why can't we all be the same, you're basically ignoring the fact that there are different systems in place that put white people in an advantageous position, and it puts other groups, people of color, in a disadvantageous position. So based off of that fact alone, people aren't the same. Internalized superiority and investment in the racial order. So in order to explain this fact, I'm going to talk about an article that was written by Peggy McIntosh in the late 80s. And it's basically a list of privileges that she wrote about herself, things that she didn't really think about, but are privileges in her everyday life. So I'm going to just highlight just 4 of them. There's a longer list of these. So as I'm highlighting these things, I want you to think about if you share any of these things in common and how that makes you different from someone that doesn't have that privilege. So number one, I can, if I wish, arrange to be in a company of people my race most of the time. If I should need to move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing housing in an area that I can afford, in which I would want to live. I can be pretty sure that my neighbors in such a location would be neutral or pleasant to me. I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. I can turn on the television or open the front page of my paper and see people of my race widely represented. When I am told about our national heritage or civilization, I am shown that people of my color made it what it is. I can be sure my children will be given curricular materials to testify to the existence of their race. And if I want to, I can be pretty sure of finding a publisher for this piece on white privilege. So she's even mentioning the fact that, hey, the fact that she can write this as a white woman, she can pretty sure find someone that's going to publish this piece. No problem. That's just a little kind of sample of things that people don't necessarily think about, but it shows privilege. So I want you to think about privilege as things as not saying that you're better than someone else, because that's obviously not what we're talking about, but things that you don't notice about when you go about your everyday life that other people don't have that same luxury. Segregation. I like doing this one because I've lived in many different parts of the country, and so it's very interesting for me when I move from different parts of the country to see demographics wise the wide separation. So filming in this, living in Arkansas. Arkansas is a very white state, and for a lot of people, they don't even realize that the surrounding communities in which they grow up, the fact that they live with white people living with white people, it's just a fact, right? They don't really think about the fact that most of the people that they hang around are the same race, and the fact that they don't have people that aren't their race isn't kind of seen as a loss or disadvantage. So kind of going back to those privileges I read about, I can go on the TV and I can see, or white people can go on the TV and they can see people representing their race. Take a step further, what do you imagine if, the only representation of people outside your race are in the media representation of that? And we know that a lot of those things are very stereotypical and negative. You internalize some of that, whether you don't realize that or not.